Let's talk about engines, but first let's mention this operational point: the oil dipstick on these cars is electronic. Volvo engineers came up with the idea that the oil level needs to be checked by connecting a proprietary diagnostic scanner to the car. In this case, the oil level can be checked in the service menu in the multimedia system itself, but its accuracy is quite approximate. In general, 5.2 liters of oil need to be poured into the second-generation Volvo XC90 diesel engine, and 5.2 liters into the diesel engine. The oil for these engines is the same, 0 watts -20 with a proprietary Volvo VCC RBS 02A approval. Diesel engines, 2.0 D4 163 horsepower, D4204T7, 2.0 D4 190 horsepower, D4204T14, 2.0 D5 225 horsepower, D4204T11, 2.0 D5 235 horsepower, D4204T23, 2.0 D5 Polestar 240 horsepower, D4204T23. All diesel versions of the Volvo XC90 are equipped with a 4-cylinder Bitturbo diesel, which we described in detail both in the V90 cross-country review and in a separate complete disassembly. This engine has proven itself. It is strong and reliable. It has a timing belt, which according to regulations needs to be changed every 120,000 kilometers or every 5 years, although initially this interval was twice as long. Unfortunately, there are cases of the original factory-installed timing belt breaking. Some annoying replacements of pipes happened even during the warranty period, but after 2017 this engine often doesn't bother about little things. However, if you have a second-generation XC90 with a diesel engine or are planning to purchase such a car, then try to pay attention to oil leaks in a timely manner. By 150,000 kilometers, these engines shamelessly leak oil from under the valve cover. Unfortunately, replacing the rubber gasket, 31,461,861, alone is often not enough. You have to change the valve cover itself, 32,213,460, because she is deformed. Its purchase will cost $300. With such a replacement, it is worth cleaning the intake manifold. The maximum layer of coat of soot and oil will be around the swirl flaps. Sometimes accumulations of shoe polish lead to jamming of the dampers or to the fact that their axis rotates in the plastic. After this, the dampers simply hang on the axle. As a rule, they do not burst or fly towards the valves. You will find traces of oil fogging every 100 to 150,000 km throughout the entire intake tract. The O-rings between the pipes are simply tanned. Usually it is enough to replace all these rings. In the first years of production, there was a problem with the disconnection of the pipes before and after the intercooler. Weak spring quick-release connections that replaced clamps were to blame for this. But still, such a problem can be expected once every 200,000 kilometers. The problem is treated by replacing specific pipes that have flown off. The plastic resonator pipe located after the turbines, 31,331,636, tends to crack after 200,000 kilometers. New, it costs more than $200. There are more economical offers on sale. The shivering of a Swedish diesel engine at idle may be due to a jammed EGR valve. By the way, in the EGR system the pipe on the flange bursts. The most powerful versions with power pulse have a problem with the tube that throws air into the exhaust manifold to spin the turbos. You can see all these weak points and features, including the crankshaft damper pulley, in a separate disassembly of the D4204T engine. That copy, by the way, ran 410,000 kilometers and died due to the owner's sloppiness. 2.0 T5 249 horsepower, 254 horsepower, B4204T23, 2.0 T5 Polestar 261 horsepower, B4204T23, 2.0 T6 320 horsepower, B4204T27, 2.0 T6 Polestar 334 horsepower, B4204T27, 2.0 T8 TwinEngine 407 horsepower, B4204T34. The second-generation Volvo XC90 also has one petrol engine, a 2-liter. The T5 version has a single turbine, while the T6 version has a turbine paired with a driven screw supercharger. There is also a plug-in hybrid called the T8 TwinEngine and later Recharge. This version has an electric motor installed in the rear axle subframe. Let's say a few words about it right away. There are problems with the electric motor, so Volvo has increased the warranty on it to 5 years. Replaces with a new one without any questions, but the gasoline engine behaves perfectly. For example, unlike a diesel engine, you are unlikely to struggle with oil leaks from under the gaskets and through the intake pipes. The timing belt replacement interval should also be reduced to 100,000 kilometers, or once every 5 years. especially if you buy a non-original, even a high-quality one. These motors do not tend to eat oil. However, for example, owners of the XC90, which were produced from 2015 to 2016, in Europe complain about the oil consumption. It's not surprising because they have a service interval of 20,000 kilometers, and there were questions about oil scraper rings. Engines from 2017 have multi-piece oil rings. Their expander perfectly allows oil to flow to the drain holes and does not become coked. After a mileage of 200,000 kilometers, misfires and lean fuel mixture errors may appear. The culprit of these problems is worn fuel injectors. One new injector for a gasoline 4 will cost $330, $31,465,786. For the T6 version, after 200,000 kilometers the supercharger may fog up. You will have to remove it and change the housing gaskets. An oil catcher with a crankcase ventilation valve, $32,140,004. For these gasoline engines costs from $70 for a Chinese analog to almost $300 for the original. There are also very cheap solutions, membranes of the valve itself. It needs to be changed if air whistling appears both through its membrane and, don't be surprised, through the crankshaft seals. The vacuum in the crankcase will be so strong that air will be sucked in through the seals. In this case, you need to deal with this problem as soon as possible. Unlike diesel engines, gasoline engines use an electric pump, $31,368,715. Today it has risen in price to $1,100, but there is a substitute for $300. For the first time it was changed by dealers, i.e. up to a mileage of 100,000 kilometers. After this, there are no frequent cases of replacing it. One can hope that she will nurse for more than 200,000 kilometers. Aisin TG-81SC 8-speed automatic transmission. Volvo's automatic transmission is in perfect order, 8-speed. The TG-81SC automatic transmission gives no cause for concern and runs smoothly for more than 400,000 kilometers. Its service life is extended by partial oil changes. Every 50,000 kilometers you can drain about 4 liters of Toyota WS type ATF. The XC90's platform is exactly the same as the V90's, and the weaknesses are similar. On the driver's side there is a small 12-volt battery with a capacity of 10 Ah. When it is discharged, an error appears in the electric power steering. Often the problem is not in the battery itself, but in severe oxidation of its terminals. The terminals must be cleaned and protected from oxidation. The generator overrunning clutch is expensive, about $260 for the original, $31,480,228, or about $35 for an analog. In the spring, on many similar Volvos, an almost empty air conditioning circuit is found. The climate control system does not produce cold. The problem is the rolling of the hose. You can see it under the generator. A new original hose costs about $150, $32,226,736, but specialized workshops will be able to produce a good analog. As already noted, the rear axle coupling is the same as many Volvos on older platforms. Haldex 5 needs an oil change, $31,367,940, every 40,000 kilometers. To do this, you need to remove the electric pump and clean its plastic oil filter. All spare parts for restoring the Haldex coupling are on sale. Today it is completely repairable, but they encounter repairs after 250,000 kilometers. The carbon brushes of the electric motor, $31,367,750, can no longer withstand. Sometimes on the oldest Volvo XC90 second generation, play is found in the bevel gear. It should be inspected at every service. In this case, oil leaks may be detected on the gearbox seals, especially on the front right drive. The hum and clicks in the gearbox also indicate that it has not survived the operation well. The oil in the front gearbox can and should be changed, although there are no regulations on this issue. Oil, $31,259,380, must be pumped out of it through the side plug and new oil must be poured through it. The Volvo XC90 suspension is quite durable if you don't torment it with openly broken roads, curbs and off-road adventures. Normally, the front levers, namely their silent blocks and ball joints, serve 120,000 to 150,000 kilometers without problems. All Volvos on the SPA platform have a double wishbone front suspension. The upper lever here usually serves less than the lower one. It has to be changed due to play in the ball, which is not sold separately in any form. A new original upper control arm, $32,395,242, costs up to $170. The lower arm, $32,381,882, is much more expensive, about $340. Its ball and silent blocks last more than 200,000 kilometers. The front stabilizer links, 31,406,873 and 31,406,874, are also very durable. The original ones lasted for 80,000 kilometers. They cost $130. But there are many analogs for $20 on average. The rear suspension of the Volvo XC90 runs 250,000 kilometers or more. The second generation Volvo XC90 was optionally equipped with air suspension. In this case, there is no composite spring in the rear suspension. There, a huge air spring, covered with a plastic corrugation, rests on the lowest lever. There are no problems at all with the air suspension. Some specialized services offer servicing of the valve block by treating it with special antifreeze for pneumatic systems. Without such a simple measure, the valve block may freeze in winter. Something that often needs attention on the Volvo XC90 chassis is the brake pads. The rear ones last about 30,000 kilometers on average. The original set, 32,287,447, costs up to $110, and decent analogs are half the price. Front pads last an average of 40,000 kilometers and cost up to $180, $32,373,125. If the Volvo XC90 is often driven on highways, then the brake pads can last up to 80,000 kilometers. If a parking brake fault message appears on your Volvo XC90 dashboard, you should read the error message to find out on which side the actuator is not working. And then you need to unwind the protective braiding of the wiring harness that runs from the wheel arch to the handbrake servos. A break in one of the wires will be detected there. Often the brake is located near the electrical connector. In frosty weather, the rear door locks on these cars freeze. They either do not open or close. And to prevent moisture from getting on the locks, Volvo engineers offered special silicone covers, 32,310,709 and 32,310,710. They cost $60 and are installed directly on the doors themselves. You will have to remove the door cards. The interiors of the Volvo XC90 are luxurious, with bright leather upholstery. Unfortunately, traces of use on the leather often appeared after a mileage of 100,000 kilometers. Of course, a lot depends on skin care. But usually, places of contact with the bodies of passengers quickly lose their appearance. Recently, the frame of the front seat has begun to break more and more often on these cars. It bursts at the crossmember on the left side. After this, a chair begins to rock, falling to the front left corner. You have to remove the chair and weld the frame. The steering wheel buttons on the XC90 were also replaced under warranty, just like on the V90. Today it's easier to disassemble a steering wheel without an airbag and take the buttons from there. Owners of all Volvos on the SPA platform should be aware that wet carpeting underfoot and under the driver's seat is a disaster. The carpet easily gets wet from snow stuck to the sole of the driver's right shoe. It melts and flows down the accelerator pedal. A rubber mat won't help here. All this moisture causes corrosion of the OFM firewall unit located under the carpet. Due to the oxidation of contacts, surprising glitches appear in its connector. For example, the Volvo engine simply cannot be turned off. The most unpleasant thing is that if the block is seriously damaged by moisture and corrosion, then resolving the issue will cost a couple of $1,000s.